Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the 9th installment of our MPF webinar series, helping firms negotiate the coronavirus pandemic. I need to go to the front of my slide deck here, but we're glad you're here, and we're going to banter a few minutes. We'll start the formal program at the top of the hour, and want to introduce to you our two featured guests today, Lee Hovermale. Lee's sitting in New Orleans, Louisiana. And how's it going there in New Orleans, and how's it going at FlexManage, Lee?
It's going well, John. It's a little muggy outside being in New Orleans. Yesterday we had significant downpours and lightning, but it had gotten a lot better today. So we have a little bit of a breakthrough of sunshine, and other than that, things are going well at FlexManage, staying busy, helping firms out. So thanks, John.
You know, it's hard to believe that New Orleans is hot and humid in the summertime. I wouldn't have thought that.
At least there's not a bloody hurricane, so or tropical storm. So no, so we're fortunate enough right now to visit New Orleans without having anything other than just some downpours of rain and living it through there. But no, it is very humid.
Typical summertime stuff.
Where I'm from.
So we got COVID, we got civil unrest, and yeah, we're waiting for the hurricanes and the earthquakes to arrive. What more do we need, right? And Uri, glad you're here.
Thanks, John.
Glad you're here. And most of you all know Uri. He's our co-host for this series and does some programming, webinars, and roundtables for law firms up New York, New Jersey region. So Uri, glad you're here. And Morris Tabush. Morris is a technologist, as is Lee. And where are you today, Morris?
I am in Monmouth County, New Jersey, where I've been for the last about 2 months and probably for the next 2 months also.
And so for those of us who don't know the geography of the Garden State, where sits Monmouth County?
So I'll say for any Bruce Springsteen fans, I am about 1.5 miles north of Asbury Park. So I've been to the Stone Pony many times, and I've never met him in person, but a lot of my friends and family have seen him out, running on the boardwalk and in the grocery stores.
Well, and who is this Bruce Springsteen of whom you speak?
If I have to explain, then you just don't get it.
Yeah.
And Bon Jovi is from Rumsden, which is about 5 or 10 miles north of here.
Well, Morris, as you know, there's a lot of things I don't get. So, and as we were grouping and kind of rehearsing yesterday, we all kind of looked back and said, you know what? We're in the old white guy bald club. Glad you guys are here. This should be a great conversation. Technology is increasingly important, as we all know, to running a successful law firm. And so we're going to drill down on this a bit and, what firms are doing, where they're going with it, the impact of COVID-19. On where we should be going with our technology to support more remote working. And so we'll share with you lots of data, lots of statistics that you can bring back to your firms, hopefully convince some of the senior partners that we do need to make these investments and move forward. If you have questions of any of our panel coming out of this, we'll share their contact information. And everyone's very eager to help and carry forth the conversations following today's program. So we are glad you're here. I noticed that we are at the top of the hour. And Uri, you're always my checker to make sure our technology's working and the screens are displayed and we're all looking okay. Are we good?
You're good. We are good.
You're on, Gutfreund. Let's roll.
Wow. Well,
Uri.
It is 2 o'clock. Uri, I love that. So whenever anything doesn't work, it's Uri. Whenever it does work, it's like, another good one by John Remsen.
That's why he's with us. With us.
Yep. All right. 1 second. John, do you want to press record and we will get started?
We are being recorded, Uri. You weren't with us when we started.
Oh, you started the record button early on me. Okay.
No, we started on time.
Did you welcome everyone already? It's 2 o'clock right now.
Yeah, we're waiting on you, Gutfreund.
Well,
That's
thanks for
fine.
having me, John. So glad to be here again with you on this exciting webinar series. Most of you know my co-host, John Remsen. John's been helping law firms forever, John. I think that's about right. John and I met on the speaking circuit probably around 8 years ago now. I had the misfortune of following him. Those of you who've seen John in person know what a great speaker and presenter he is. So
Right,
delighted to be here with you, John. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Uri. That's why I have him introduce me, because he can say stuff like that. I can't say those things, at least didn't have any credibility. And Uri Gutfreund, I'm sure many of you know Uri. He does managing partner programming, New York, New Jersey. And we met years ago on the speaking circuit and started conceiving this webinar series when COVID-19 hit us. And we're trying to find something to do because we're not going to visit law firms anymore and speaking gigs are off the table. So Uri, always great to see you. Thanks for being with us. We've heard from our participants that get through these introductions. Let's get to the point. So let's quickly introduce our guest speakers. And first, we're going alphabetically, is Lee Hovermale. And Lee's been working law firm technology for many, many years, decades, and is the CEO of FlexManage, which provides IT solutions to law firms. Lee's out there speaking. He writes articles on technology. And Lee, is there anything else that is not here on the screen or that I didn't mention that you'd like our participants today to know about you?
No, that pretty much sums it up, John. We can move on. Thanks.
Excellent. I like that, Lee. I wish all our panelists were so cooperative. Speaking of uncooperative panelists, Morris Tabush. Morris is our first repeat guest speaker to the series. And so Morris, it's good to have you back. We did a program on what did we talk? Law Firm of the Future. Yep. And our first speaker took all of your time, and I felt guilty. And so here you come back.
This
and
is my
Morris,
prize.
Morris runs the Tabush Group. He's based in New York. They've been providing IT solutions to law firms, other professional services firms for a good many years. And like the rest of us, he's out there on the speaking circuit and is a regular publisher of articles and white papers and such on technology. So Morris, welcome. And well, thank you. We appreciate your being with us. And is there anything else you want people to know before we jump into our topic?
If you get me started, I may never end. So let's just get on with the show, and I'm sure it'll all come out in good time.
Some panelists are challenging to moderate. Uri, you do a lot of moderating, and some people are easy, and fun to work with.
This is gonna be an easy one, John. Don't worry.
I jest. Morris and Lee, so glad you're with us. Thank you for being a part of our series. And let's jump in. Uri and I have been doing these. This is the 9th. We really tune into the input from our participants. So please, at the at the backside of our program, you'll be directed to a brief survey. What'd you like best? What'd you like least? Please tell us. Give us your input, because we do tune into this. And I think we found a really good formula for presenting webinars. We hear the term Zoom fatigue and webinar fatigue, and we try to be lively and fun and conversational and not take ourselves too seriously, but also leave you all with really relevant, timely benchmarking data and learning from experts like Lee and Morris on some of the challenges of leading law firms. So we'll get through our opening remarks, share with you some survey results. We've learned that people love the benchmarking data. You guys filled out some surveys as you registered. We'll share with you those results. We got some audience polling technology too. Uri will tell us how to work that. Then we're going to invite Lee to talk for a bit what he thinks managing partners, leaders of mid-sized law firms need to be tuning into in terms of technology and the evolution of the profession, particularly in the wake of the pandemic. Then we'll ask Morris to follow with some opening remarks. Keep it, 5 to 7 minutes. Then the fun part, the group discussion, where we will field through the questions you all asked us at registration and the audience polling. So that segues into how this audience polling works, please.
Yeah, sure, John. So during the course of the session, John will pop up some polling questions and you'll answer right on the screen. It'll be interesting. Sometimes we'll ask the panelists to sort of opine on them, and we'll see, John, we'll see how good they are, won't we?
We asked them to predict, and they either look really smart or, ooh, missed that one. Our group 2 weeks ago, Uri, they were spot on with their predictions of how people would answer live polling questions.
So no pressure, Lee, no pressure, Morris. And then we also have the opportunity, if you look on the panel on your right screen where it says questions, feel free to throw the questions during the course of the presentation there, and I will be monitoring it. If I'm looking to the side, that's not me looking away, that's me looking at your questions. So feel free to send those questions, and then when we get to the group discussion time, we will bring those together and we'll present them to our panelists. So really excited. It's going to be a great discussion today, John.
Yes.
John, can people see this after the fact?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Uri. Absolutely. We record this. Everybody here today will send out the recording as well as the slide deck and a nice little set of handout materials that will have the results of our polling questions and a couple articles that Lee and Morris's shops will have provided just to kind of help us through this topic. But there will be some follow-up coming your way, and then we'll put it. We archive all these webinars on a page on our website. So if we're going to throw back to some previous polling, and if you're interested more in topics like the PPP loan, or return to office, or maintaining productivity, working remotely, or marketing during a pandemic, we've covered those topics, and you can go hear the recordings. They're free and on our website. So people are working at home. People are working at home. And in late April, we did a program on how to maintain productivity, profitability, performance when people are working at home. 149 managing partners, law firm leaders weighing in, and a widely held perception that our performance and profitability is being impacted in a negative way when people work at home. Now, that may or may not be true, but that's how law firm managing partners perceive the situation. In a subsequent webinar, we did one on maintaining your culture as we distance and isolate and work more and more remotely. And here's some data that our panelist, one of our panelists, Leah Nelson, shared. This is from Gallup, and it talks about the number of workers that are now working remotely. Almost 2/3 of the U.S. workforce is working remotely, and 60% of them want to stay home when this pandemic blows by. Now, what does that mean for your law firm and your investments in technology and your investments in your office space and real estate? Are we being thoughtful, strategic, proactive, and forward-thinking with our decisions? But there's some interesting data that it might be hard getting people back to the office when this blows by us. Uri, you sit in New York City and northern New Jersey, and particularly acute in your markets. Anything you want to share about how New York, New Jersey firms are recovering from this?
Yeah, it's interesting. We are on the beginning stages of some firms opening up. And the thing that we're learning from our group meetings the last couple of weeks is coming together in the physical space. Some are trying it and it's very underwhelming. If you think that there's going to be a panacea day where you're going to flip the switch on, at least in New York, you're not. It has been increasingly disappointing. And what that tells us is that the technology and the culture is so much more important because it's not over. It's not going to be over this week. It's not going to be over next week. Probably not in 2020 if we're lucky. So there's no switch. It's not just if we could just make it to that time. So from our perspective, it is so important to get the culture and the technology right. It's not going away.
And to contrast that, Uri, I've got clients that never shut down their offices.
Yep.
Wow.
It's business as usual.
Not yet.
They tend to be in more rural markets, and smaller firms and smaller towns. But there are situations where, working remotely, what are you talking about? But these are interesting times. And I think this whole COVID thing is accelerating long-term trends. We've talked about that. Now, when y'all registered, we asked the percentage of revenue your firms are investing in technology. That would include the hardware, the software, the training, all in. What's your firm investing as a percentage of revenue? 76 firms weighing in. And Lee, you had a surprising reaction to this data when we looked at it yesterday.
I would say the thing that jumped out the most is that 23% of the firms surveyed really didn't know what they were spending on technology. And that was really surprising from my standpoint, because most of the clients that we deal with have a grasp on what they're spending. So maybe it wasn't that they didn't want to share, but that was surprising.
Morris, anything jump out at you when we looked at this data?
Besides from agreeing with Lee, it's that you've got that 43%, it looks like, are at less than 5%. Now, either that means they're amazingly efficient and they've figured things out that everybody else hasn't, or they're spending very little on technology, but they're also getting much less back in return.
Okay. So that's kind of the spending levels. Where are we going with it looking forward in the wake of COVID-19? And here's what folks had to say. In the wake of COVID, what is our future investment in technology going to look like? And 41% say we're going to bump it up. Any surprises there, gentlemen?
No, it's pretty much in line with what we're seeing across the board. I'm not even surprised at the 3% decrease, because there's certain firms in certain areas of law that are decreasing because of COVID shutting down a lot of their practices and interaction. But I would say where you're looking at the about the same to moderate increases is pretty accurate.
Morris?
What I'll say is, while 41% are going to be increasing their spend, I would bet money that most of those on a dollar for dollar basis will more than offset that with savings in real estate and other areas of the business.
Perhaps less support staff. You know, we're hearing that we're not going to need as many people.
Right, and those savings will greatly outweigh the increased IT spend. And they'll get a much bigger value.
What do you think? And we, you know, there's so much to cover here. And I told Uri at the beginning, we need to get through this, but you know, it just prompts so many questions. What do you think is the appropriate level of spend as a percentage of revenue, say for a 50 lawyer firm?
I would say, I'd say between 7 and 9% of revenue is what we see on average. And again, getting back to, and Morris has touched on this, you see the return on productivity, and a lot of that spend increases the overall percentage of margin and profit, because they are efficient in leveraging technology at the highest levels.
Morris, would you echo that?
I echo that, and you know what? Spending $1 on the right technology, it has so much higher return on investment than $1 on additional staff.
So Lee, you said 7 to 9% is where we see most firms. Is that about where you think they should be?
That is where we think they should be. Most of our firms, we support about 140, are in that realm. There's a few that are above that. We have a few that are below it based upon the areas of, again, touching on the areas of law that they practice. But the majority of the firms fall in that sweet spot.
Okay. We asked you all, and this is a kind of a controversial question, because I know we have some CIOs on today's webinar who, you know, but this, you know, to the managing partner, how confident are you in your firm's IT department? And more than half of you say, I'm highly confident. And Lee, you've said not so fast.
Correct, John. So traditionally what we see in engaging law firms is that, and we traditionally do work with the managing partners in the small to mid-sized law firms, the upper mid-size and upper, we're working with their CIOs. It's interesting because the majority of the partners really don't understand what technology is, how they're investing their technology. And I would say traditionally we see about 35% overall of the confidence being that high. And then we see it drift more into the ratio of somewhat confident to not confident on the majority of them.
This is, I think, too important an area not to be confident in your firm's IT capabilities. Morris, any comment to this data?
So we work on the slightly smaller side than Lee's firm. You know, we're typically in the small to mid-sized firms, and our firms are, typically don't have a, that big. If they have an IT staff, it'll be 2 to 3 people at the most. But unfortunately, the managing partners way too often, their level of confidence is sort of inversely related to 2 things. When was the last time there was a big outage or a security breach? And how many complaints are they getting from their staff? Those are the 2 things. And that's not an accurate, representation. They really need to be asking, besides maintaining things and keeping the systems up and running, what else has the IT department done?
Okay.
20 years ago, their job was keep it running. Today, it should be much more than that.
Much more strategic.
Absolutely.
Pushing the firm forward, evolving. Huge area. We were talking, the first law firm I worked with in the 80s, our IT director was so into Wang, and we couldn't get him off Wang. And, you'd go into that magic room with the air conditioning blowing and the lights blinking and the wires everywhere. And yeah, relics of the past. First polling question, everybody.
John, while you're pulling that up, I just want a quick question for Lee. And the questions keep coming, and I want them to keep coming, but just a clarification while John's pulling up our first poll. Lee, you mentioned 7 to 9%. One of the questions we got from the room is, when you say 7 to 9%, is that including capital, operating, training, all in, or would you break it out to
all
even
in.
more? All in. Okay, thank you.
No, it's all in. Yes.
If you guys would go ahead and log in, just to, make sure everybody is using their little audience polling and help give our panelists a sense of firm sizes represented here today. And I've got about 3/4 of our participants in. And here's the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, not too late. Vote now, vote today. And let's close it out and share the firm sizes with us today. So there we go. A lot of smaller firms, about 1/3 of our audience, 40% of our audience, smaller firms. And so you got an interesting variety of people. So, trying to couch our remarks that there's a little in it for everybody, regardless of firm size. Lee, this is a question you wanted to ask, and then we're going to turn the microphone over to you. But our next polling question is regarding multi-factor authentication. Is your firm using this to gain access to your networks? And Lee, as we launch this, why don't you tell us what multi-factor authentication is? Because I would venture to say a lot of the people on this call really don't know.
So multi-factor authentication is a level of security, so it's a challenge. So instead of just having access to your network from outside without the ability to be challenged in the event that maybe a password has been compromised through a phishing attack or the loss of a firm device. So if you have multi-factor authentication and your password is compromised, we'll just use the phishing attack because that seems to be the most prevalent these days. Even if the nefarious character gains access to your password, they still can't get into your network if you're leveraging the challenge process through multi-factor authentication. So the truest, go ahead.
And what do you predict our crowd is going to answer here in terms of the percentage of firms that are using multi-factor authentication?
I would say, 60%, 65%.
There we go. There we go. So let me close this poll, and Lee, invite you to share with us kind of big picture, what guidance you would offer firm leaders on technology to improve performance and profitability.
Thank you. Do I have control, or are you controlling the slides, John?
You just tell me when you want to advance, and I'll try to.
Slide. And you can skip this. This is just here for what I call propaganda and advertising for our company, but I won't waste anybody's time on this.
I call it shameless self-promotion.
That way I give Morris more time back so he can actually. So on the next slide, John, please.
Hey, I like you. You got New Zealand and Australia. That's cool.
Yeah, we were recently acquired by a company called New Era Technology. So we went from a U.S. regional-based company to an international-based company. So that's okay, John.
That sounds like cha-ching for you, Lee. Cha-ching.
Sure, cha-ching. So the way that we approach our clients is there's a couple different methods that we walk in, and again, we approach things from a business aspect, not so much a technology aspect, and we drive things around risk and compliance, which we call a gap analysis. Most of the time, what we find out is the shocking nature of when you advise a law firm, especially their leadership, of the areas in which they thought they were secure or the areas that they thought they were actually meeting compliance, that there are gaps in those areas. And then at that point, you can address the gap with a technology if need, or even maybe just education. So when we look at risk and compliance, we look at it holistically, thinking about business continuity, disaster recovery, as well as pandemic planning. And then we approach that in a very systematic way. And then we apply logic instead of, to the point that Morris was saying, spending $1, on the right technology versus adding more people. We find a lot of cases where firms are just spending a lot of money on one-off applications that are addressing a one-off need because hypothetically a partner, an associate says, I need this one application. And even though the firm may have 3 other applications that meet the same requirements, they're like, yeah, but it's got a better interface.
Right.
So instead of learning it, they want to go buy it. And then that touches on the currently owned hardware and software. We find a lot of times that firms own most of the things that are required for them to practice law. And if they don't, it's very easy to either train on it because they don't understand it. So what we've found is the adoption of technology within a law firm is less than 60%.
Wow.
And those are law firms that do not leverage the adoption, what we call the adoption ratio, or the maturity ratio of training and awareness, and really letting the IT department come and meet with the practice or practices, and then learn what those practices are doing, and then applying a technology through that learning phase, as well as making sure there's a training element to it as well. And then as we've all become attuned to working remotely and what we'll call the pain and suffering of sitting at home while your kids are Zooming, Xbox, things such as that, nobody ever took into consideration what we classify as infrastructure. And then in someone's house, because they really didn't have to worry about the kids at home, they were at school, they were working remotely. And then the advent of this thing called a wireless network in your house becoming saturated. And in some cases, we have found entire neighborhoods in the Northeast, the Northwest, that have actually become completely inundated to that you can put as much technology you want in your house. The network itself in those regions are being compromised or stretched or stressed. And so that's been an interesting advent with this COVID thing. And then the use of technology maturity, what we have found over and over and over again with this adoption, is that the firms really struggle with this thing called training. And the reason being is that the training that is currently being presented to most of these lawyers are not relevant because they're watching an entire training module on how to use Word versus how the actual attorney for his area or her area of law uses Word, and then having very pinpoint training so that they can go in and click on a module, and instead of it being 10 minutes, it's more like 45 to 60 seconds to 90 seconds of how to create a table of authorities or a table of contents, or how to do paragraph numbering, how to use pivot tables. We have found once you go into that targeted adoption and training, that the productivity of the firm actually sometimes doubles, and in some cases triples, because you're targeting your audience to exactly how they use the said technology that they've purchased. So the common mistakes that we hear over and over again is cloud is going to fix everything. Again, what we run into is, unless you have the appropriate infrastructure, you have the appropriate redundancies, and you have the ability to still work in some way local, because if you lose the internet for any reason at all, or if you're traveling, you still need to have access to your documents. Because again, lawyers, administrative staff, they work in the document realm, and if they can't have access to those documents and work on them in a disjointed state, they still need to have that. So we help them through the navigation of saying you still have the ability to bring it down and work locally, making sure that you have those applications, having a firm device that is secure, and then that way, if you do lose that connectivity to that device, you can still practice law and continue to bill. And then again, touching on assuming current infrastructure is adequate, the reason that people assume that is because they were so used to working in their office, or when they were working at home when their kids were at school, and now all of a sudden you're having the competing world of children, gaming, videoing, and then you trying to perform your work from your house. So we always say everyone, and there are ways, so we do a lot of education around how to tweak a Spectrum modem, believe it or not. We have handout glossies on how to do mesh networking in your house. That way we're bringing that to the end user. We're actually giving them parts. We're giving them nice pictures with arrows on them on where to point, who to call at Spectrum, because Spectrum seems to be the most problematic cable modem people that we run into across the country.
Or Morris is over there, nodding in agreement.
So that, and then the other mistakes that are made are just training or lack thereof. People do not put enough credence into the productivity, and I'm going to sound like a broken record, but every time we're brought into a law firm to help them somewhat assess and audit, the first thing we ask is training and adoption. And I will say that 80% of the time that when we're in a firm and we look at, even though they say there's training and adoption, the way that they're going about it can be tweaked and optimized to the points that I was making earlier. And then not knowing what each software package is capable of and how to apply it, again, sounding redundant, is we have found that the use of just the simple Office product, Microsoft Office, Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, and then adding on products such as macro packages, templates. A lot of those things are basically intrinsic in the actual product. People just don't know how to optimize it, or they weren't trained on how to use it. So they go out and buy third-party products and bolt on and make it even more complex and more onerous to use the actual technology that they've already owned. And then purchasing solutions based upon need versus already having, again, very redundant, but very to the point, is that we find in some cases, I have one firm that had 320 applications. There were about 1,000 attorneys. And within those applications, we found that 90% of those applications were one-off, that only one or two people were using across the firm. And then there were competing technologies that they actually had, in one case, 10 different products that did the same exact thing, but they had different logos on them because people had different relationships or different opinions on how to use the product. So that was interesting. And then it's somewhat, getting back to Morris's point, manual versus automated, the point of how do you do business intake? How do you deal with matter management? How are you dealing with your document management? How are you dealing with identifying and searching for documents? A lot of people struggle in this realm, and they go about different types of decision criteria, or they say that my firm is too small to actually use some type of matter management or intake process or conflicts. And what they seem to overlook is the advantage of the people that do use it, that I can have the point of a matter being conflicted, researched, and then brought back in a matter of hours, or in some cases a day, versus the people that still send out an email and you get somewhat of a response if people are reading their email, especially when they're at home with their kids and their dogs barking and everything else, and saying, does anybody have any conflict with this client or this matter? And you get maybe 40% hit ratio back, which again puts risk to the firm if it's not a true conflict check pertaining to a client or a matter. So next slide, please, John.
Certainly. Hang on.
So, technology overview and rapid changes. So what we look at is, and instead of being on the bleeding edge, we call it being the middle of the road. You have what you need to practice law. And again, The thing is working with the internal IT staff and not letting the internal IT staff just recommend a vendor, or having an attorney come into the IT staff and just accomplishing what we call the madness of, well, they said they needed it, so we went out and bought it. And then what happens is that the need of these additional products increase the overhead, increase the need for more IT people, increase the need for just the overall complexity of it, and it really isn't needed. And again, I don't mean to harp on lawyers. Basically draft a document, their associates, their support staff help create the document with it. They basically print the document, they publish the document, and file the document. It doesn't need to be overly onerous unless you're in an IP firm dealing with IP litigation, and you're dealing with briefs and appellate courts. Those are very rare in the cases of it. But what we see is most law firms buy the complete package, or we call the Taj Mahal, and they implement it, and it's basically useless to 80% of the firm, when only 20% of the firm actually needs to use that said technology or application. The other thing that we found is interesting is, especially with this COVID, is what we call the Gen XYZ, which is just basically people that are between the ages of 23 to 45. When they started working from home, they did not need a secretary. They didn't need support staff. They were basically publishing, creating, editing, modifying, creating templates, creating briefs on the fly very quickly, where the rest of the firm, where we see the firms are struggling with, we'll just say it, the more complex, mature partners were still requiring need of a secretary, and so forth and so on. The other thing that was interesting is that the applications such as remote time management, having a tool such as iTimekeep, having a tool like Carpe Diem, or now with Intap, or just having access so that when you're creating a document, and again, it's going to pop up and say, by the way, you spent 35 minutes on creating this document, and having that automation do it instead of writing it down on a piece of paper and then taking a Photoshop copy of it and then sending it to a secretary or an administrative staff person to enter your time for you. We saw that greatly diminish in this COVID, that the use of the technology has gone up, and the productivity, based upon your other slide, is actually meeting those demands quite nicely. So the other piece of it is secure access. People, and again, the multi-factor authentication, people have literally kind of forgot the need of what security is, and they just want ease of access. They don't want buttons. They don't want to be challenged. They don't want to have a dialog box pop up. But the problem is that we've seen in the last 3 months, the threat ratio escalate almost 1,000% with phishing attacks, with people getting scanned from all different countries, including some people within the United States. And if you don't have a security knowledge and posture, and if you don't do phishing and spear phishing training, we saw in the first month of COVID remote access, we'll call it, I was going to say remote access hell, we saw the majority of about 40% of the firms either get attacked, passwords being compromised, and people at risk because they weren't leveraging the training that they were given before, as well as not leveraging technology like multi-factor authentication to help thwart the potential of an attack by giving up your password.
Lee, I'm going to have to ask you to kind of jump it up.
Yeah,
so
I was going to
Morris
move
in here.
Yeah, I was going to say, the last thing is on this slide, and I'll move to the bottom, is that the machine learning and the ability to do contract review with machine learning, everyone is jumping on this bandwagon. Please don't think that machine learning is the hidden grail, that it just does it for you. We've seen a lot of people make some severe mistakes by just focusing on machine learning and thinking that it's going to work without having some type of reviewer. Please keep in mind, we've seen it over and over again. It's about, I'll say 70% accurate. You still need to use 30% of common sense and having your people review it. So next slide, John. Again, I touched on matter management. Conflicts and records management should be evaluated. Again, people holding on to everything forever takes up space, takes up money. It costs money to store it. It costs money to back it up. please focus on records management. Look at your support staff and analyze and just kind of understand what your support staff's really offering, making sure that they're part of the firm, making sure they're integrated with the firm as they're going through it. And really, if you want to tell if you have a good IT person, support person, they should be working with the firm's leadership, understanding their technology needs, listening to their technology needs, and applying those technology needs in a cost-effective manner. And then last, it's kind of collections rules. WIP to invoice to collections is a must. We've seen WIP in the recent months take off. We've seen collections go down because clients aren't paying their bills. They're holding off. So again, focus on that and focus on making sure that you're getting your time in an efficient manner. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Lee. And I hate to rush this because, I almost think these should run a half day, and it's, I don't
want to hurt my friend Morris.
Well,
like what happened to him
already beat on me. So, before we go to Morris, and let's ask you how your firm handles its IT requirements, mostly in-house, all in-house, mostly outsourced. We outsource all of it. Or, you know what, John, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% sure. How you guys handling your IT? And Morris, while our results are coming in, why don't you predict for us what you think is going to be our number one answer?
I think based on the size of the firms that I saw earlier, it's going to be mostly outsourced. And I think in general, the smaller the firm is, the more they're outsourcing, but that's what I think will be the most popular answer here.
Mostly outsourced. And 4, 3, 2, 1. Vote early, vote often. We'll close it up. About 3/4 of you in, and look what we got.
I know. I can't quit my day job.
I know.
It was close, though. It's close. It's close.
Mostly in-house is what our crowd here says. So with that, let me turn our attention to Mr. Tabush.
All right. Thank you, John. Lee, I just want to say that what you said was so on point about security, about cloud. If I had extra time, I'd share a quick story on security that just happened literally at the start of this pandemic, but we'll see how things go later on. But that was fantastic. So jump right into things. Remote access. Up until 3 months ago, remote access was a nice thing to have that we used occasionally when we were in a pinch. 3 months ago, or almost 4 months ago now, that all changed. Without further ado, there's a couple of ways that firms typically work remotely that I want to talk about, because today everybody is working remotely. Number one is through a local computer, where you have some type of, you have a computer wherever you are now at home, and you've got a mix of cloud and web applications and a VPN combination. So you're probably doing, the users do a VPN back to the office. Some of the stuff they get direct, such as Office 365, certain things are on the web. There's a bunch of different ways to access things. Second method we see very often is that you're using something like a Log Me In or a Go to My PC or remote desktop to get back to your computer that sits at your desk in that office that you haven't been to in so many months. And last but not least is the remote access server, typically Citrix or a terminal server, where everybody goes into that central server. Those are the 3 typical ways that we work remotely. John, if we could forward. Okay, so what I want to talk about is what is necessary to support this new normal, because let's call it what it is. We're all remote, or we're mostly remote. And most of us don't know if and when we'll be back to everyone in the office, but I think we can all agree it's probably not in 2020. So first and foremost is we need everybody at the firm to be fully productive without barriers. Now, it's interesting. When I was in school, in Israel many years ago, in the study hall, everybody had what was called their place of concentration, or for those of you who know Hebrew, their makom kavua, which meant that, listen, there's all desks in the study hall and all tables, and you could sit anywhere, but I had my spot, and that's where I felt most comfortable. That's where I got everything done. Now, it's hard enough for people to work at home because they're not at their desk in their space with their files and their things. And then you're going to add in, they've got distractions such as kids and pets. They may not have as good of a computer. They may be working off a small little laptop, not 3 big screens. So that all makes it hard enough. But you know what? When people are billing their normal rates, with everything going on these days and with all the challenges that our businesses are going to face as a result of this, everybody needs to be fully productive without any barriers. Secondly, from a security and compliance perspective, like Lee said, security is more important than ever. Number one is there are all the existing threats. 6 months ago, security is a big concern, and now the bad guys are using COVID-19 and what's going on to their advantage to try to phish people and trick them and con them. As well, all of your firm's work, all of your firm's data is leaving the 4 walls of the office. So your security has to be flexible and has to spread beyond your local area network. From a communication collaboration standpoint, whatever tools you had need to be enhanced, because now there's no walking around the office and overhearing things and knocking on someone's door. Speaking about employee monitoring, so some firms used to arrange the offices that all the monitors faced out, so everybody could just kind of glance over and see what people are doing at their computers. These days, it's important to both monitor the day-to-day, whether it's a screen watching or screen recording or logging activity of what people are doing and how much time they're spending on different websites and different documents. You know, that captures the day-to-day, it captures the input. But just as, if not more important, is monitoring the output, monitoring the productivity. Forget how long they're working, but what are they actually getting done? And developing, if your firm does not yet have the right metrics and the right KPIs to determine how effective an attorney or a staff member is, this is when those metrics are more important than ever. And last but not least, support and help desk is very different than it used to be. First and foremost, they can't do on-site support anymore. You can't have a tech support person walk over to an attorney's desk and look over their shoulder and say, oh, the problem is the wire came out, or the problem is your printer's out of paper. Second of all, you've got IT people supporting all new challenges. Like Lee said, all of a sudden, there's your home network, there's your Wi-Fi, there's your internet provider in your neighborhood. You've got 100 employees, there's 100 different setups. Whereas in the past, everybody sat at the same type of desk, had the same computer plugged into the same network, it was all in the IT's control. But support is still necessary because your people are struggling enough as it is to work. And the last thing they need are more tech support challenges. Let's fast forward again, John.
Yes, sir.
Too much. Okay. So going back to the 3 ways we work remotely, I want to talk about the most common issues that everybody is probably encountering. Number one, if you're on the local computer with VPN and a bunch of web applications and different things coming in different ways, 2 problems. Number one, you've got disjointed parts. Not everything is going to work the same as it did in your office. In the office, you've got Word with the integration to Time Matters, with the integration to tabs. You know, everything is integrated. Everything is there. That's your reserved place in the study hall. You've got everything laid out exactly as it is. Doesn't exist when all of a sudden you're connecting remotely to different things in different ways. And if you're connecting from a home computer over a VPN, you're all of a sudden exposing your entire home network to your entire corporate network. And who knows what's crawling around on your home network. And we've seen several firms get breached because somebody VPN'd in from a home computer that wasn't secure. The log me in, go to my PC, remote PC solution. So the nice thing about this is it is exactly your computer that you left at your desk. The biggest problems are, number one, you've got sluggish performance. You know, those solutions for 10 or 15 bucks a month are great for a pinch. But if you're doing 40, 50 hours a week on these remote sessions, the sluggishness is gonna hit you. And there's no audio video. If you've got to watch a video, participate in a webinar like this one, do a VoIP call, you can't do it through these platforms, so you're switching A to B all day long. And the office network still needs to be available. Back in the Hurricane Sandy days, we had clients that called us and said, hey, I can't use my log me in or my go to my PC. Why not? I said, well, because your office has no power right now and there's nothing for you to log into. So obviously times like this, that's not an issue, but we have had some firms tell us, oh, the IT guy keeps having to go to the office to reboot people's computers when they freeze up or when they go offline. And then you've got the Citrix or terminal server solution, the remote servers. The biggest challenges we've seen with those is, number one, it's not the same as your desktop. you've got some of the applications, but not all the applications. Some of the shortcuts, some of the integrations aren't there because it's a corporate mandated session, not what you've been using all this time. Applications software is designed to run on a desktop and server, and it often has to be fooled to run in a Citrix environment because it wasn't built for that. And sometimes it doesn't work as good. Furthermore, you've got what's called contention. So in a Citrix environment, you may have 30 employees sharing one server. And as my partner likes to say, if you're at the lunch at the bodega and one guy sneezes on the salad bar, there goes the whole salad bar. And in Citrix, one person does something that hammers the server or freezes something up, and all 30 people get kicked out at once. These Citrix environments, they are complex to manage. I'm sure Lee could agree with me on that, and they are expensive. Many people have made a lot of money off of selling and supporting Citrix. And last but not least, once again, the office still needs to be online. So times like this, it's not so bad, but in a snowstorm or a disaster, that becomes a problem. So a little bit of a sneak preview to a webinar that I'm doing next week is, we believe the best kept secret out there, the best solution for firms is what's called desktop as a service. To highlight what desktop as a service is very briefly, it is the same desktop and server model that law firms and businesses have been using for over 20 or 30 years, but everything, the desktops, the servers, all move to the cloud. It is unlike a go to my PC scenario where you've got a local PC, then you've got to figure out a way to access it remotely. Desktop as a service is built to be accessed remotely. It actually launched around the 2011, 2012 in the Fortune 100, it was called VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. And over the last 7 years, it's just gotten so much better and become so much more accessible to people who are not Fortune 100. Some of the benefits, accessible from anywhere. Every application, whether it's cloud or on-premise applications, are 100% compatible, and it works exactly the same no matter where you are. Some of the firms who use this have been using words like godsend. They can't imagine life without it. One of our clients down in the Houston area actually said, I put this in 6 months ago and I feel like the smartest guy in town because of that. As far as how do firms get desktop as a service? Oops, sorry, last bullet point. There are many providers from the small boutiques all the way up to the big guys like the Microsoft and the Amazons of the world. And there are many options. You can buy the ingredients and do it yourself, or you can go to a full service company who will deliver it and support it for you. Now we can go forward. So sort of my what's next. I'm gonna just highlight the middle four, the last three of these. Number one, because we've always done it that way, that's over. That argument is long gone.
But we hear that one a lot. We've never done it that way before.
We've always done it a certain way.
Yeah.
If this hasn't underscored that that's the time to think differently is now, I don't know what will. Law firms have to stop looking at IT as an expense. It is not, coffee is an expense. IT is an investment. And the way you budget for your IT, like Lee, or like we did earlier in the survey, has to change, and it is going to be, whether you like it or not, IT has shifted from a CapEx to an OpEx. Even if you want to still have hardware, software, it's all going to a licensing and rental model. With that, I'll hand it back to you, John.
Boy, you guys both, so much to share and so articulate, and it's hard as the moderator to, contain you within your 5 to 7 minute time allotment.
Did I stick to my 7 minutes? Uri, are you the timekeeper here?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't.
Well,
it's okay. It's okay.
Well, I always will share what the audience has to say, but I really think very, very timely and valuable information. And here's where we shift to a conversation. I'm looking at the clock. We've got all of 10 minutes. So Uri, I'm going to ask you to take over and kind of sift through the questions we've been getting and pick a few and let's toss them around.
Sure. Well, the feedback we've been getting is really good. As John said, your presentation were both really excellent. A couple of questions I'm hearing around, most of actually what you both spoke about was that tech is not only about purchasing, it's maybe mostly about using them efficiently, using your tech efficiently. Training is one way. to use it more efficiently, right? So a couple of questions have come in regarding integration and webinar tools. Some firms have all their systems all chopped up, hopefully not like Lee's client that had 10 things that do the exact same. But what we're getting is, I have a billing system over here. I maybe have a business development CRM here, might have a time system here. There are those packages that are all inclusive. Is that the way to go? Or are we integrating a lot of piecemeal? What say you, gentlemen?
So I'll go first, Martin. So it really depends on the size of the firm. I think in a small to mid-sized firm, having a basically all-in-one encompassing package is definitely more efficient and a way to go, because the larger firms, you really just can't do that because there's too many complexities and differences of the way you have to deal with bill formats. But I would say small to mid, focus on finding a solution that has a lot of those functionalities built into it. There's a couple systems that are out there to do that. And then in the larger firms, you're going to have to make sure that you do have the integration of the CRM system, the matter intake, and all the other ones at the ready on the desktop. And most of them now have that if the integration is set up correctly.
So Lee, before Morris, you get to that, what are the three, total packages, the top three in your view, that you think best serve smaller and mid-sized law firms?
I would say you've got Tabs, you've got Total Office, and then I would say Coyote is the last one.
Okay,
so
thank you.
I'll agree with Lee, but I'll say even with a Tabs or a Coyote, which I don't know Total Office, but Tabs and Coyote we know well. We believe strongly in best of breed and integrations. There's too many people out there selling an all-in-one solution, and like the saying goes, jack of all trades, master of none. We've seen a lot of firms successfully integrate different solutions, and while we're not a software development shop, we've worked with a lot of companies who've helped integrate to get best of breed from everybody. And also a firm has to look at the cost of change. If you've got a really great time and billing system and practice management and all you're lacking is document management, it's probably much easier to find a really good doc management system to integrate than to change everything. Changing systems is hard for any size firm.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Morris.
Uh-oh.
How about a CRM system? Business development, marketing.
Okay.
Obviously we can't do it in the office anymore. If
So
we weren't doing it before, what do we use, Morris? Don't worry, Lee, I'll get to you next.
My very short answer is this. We use HubSpot. There are many good ones out there, but the number one problem I've seen with CRM systems, and again, this is not something we consult on, but I'm happy to share my experience more in depth offline with whoever's interested, is adoption. The best CRM systems don't do it themselves. And and every good salesman thinks they know better and they have their own way. That's the number one thing. So there's a lot of good packages out there, and I've helped, actually was just talking to Sharon Abrams about this last week. A lot of good systems out there. It's about how you use it.
Well, and as we all know, in many firms, the lawyers don't want to share their contacts with one another. These are mine. These are mine.
Well, that's a cultural problem, not a CRM.
That is a cultural problem. But if we're running a collection of sole practitioners sharing office space, let's try not force CRM on them.
John, that's your business. Morris doesn't know about that. Come on. That's your bailiwick. Good.
Generally, I think Interaction is a good product for large law, big law, and for smaller and mid-sized firms, Contact Ease seems to be a popular solution. And Jeff Reed, if you've come to our managing partner conferences, you've met Jeff before, but they seem to have a nice solution for mid-sized law firms. But if people aren't using it, people aren't willing to share, nobody's monitoring the quality of the data, garbage in, garbage out.
I have one more question. I know we're running low on time, but as we are on a webinar, and certainly something we've learned out of this situation is we're all going to be doing more webinars. Okay. What's the best webinar tool? We're putting our panel on the spot a lot today, John. Lee first and then Morris. What should firms be using?
For ease, it's going to be Zoom or WebEx. Those are the two popular ones. The only thing that I will caution is make sure that you are using the passcodes. Don't just send it out without a passcode. As we've all seen in the news, bad things happen. But I would say those are the top two that are out there right now.
Morris, what do you
So,
see?
It's just to clarify, if we're talking webinar like we're on now with panelists and presenters and audience, we know GoToWebinar and Zoom both have great products. If we're talking about web conferencing tools, which is more for 4, 5, 10-person meetings, I would say it's either Zoom or Microsoft Teams. Teams has gotten really popular. I think they've done a ton of innovation in the last 3 months. And if you're an Office 365 firm already, then Teams is included. So Teams sort of takes Zoom and Slack and more and rolls it all into one and does a pretty good job.
Yeah, the big three, I think, Uri, you would likely agree, seem to be Zoom, GoToWebinar, and Microsoft Teams.
Mm-hmm.
And all of them have their plus and minuses. We use GoToWebinar. I like it. There's a familiarity, and it seems to have all the bells and whistles that I want to use. But yeah, we're going to see more and more webinars and virtual meetings for sure.
Yes.
Uri, any other questions that I'm looking at that clock, and boy, does the time fly by. Any other questions that are jumping out at you?
Yeah, well, there's the perennial question, and it's good to get updated on the panel, I think, particularly because now that we've had a couple months of being remote, a lot of firms are now officially putting in their policies. So we did get a few questions related to this. So going forward, letting people to use their personal computers, or is it firm-owned equipment?
Lee, you want to go first?
Sure. We push for firm-owned equipment.
Okay.
Because of security. There is going to become a day that the moratorium of HIPAA will be released, and then you'll have other violations. But yes, once it leaves those walls, you cannot just give anybody access to the firm data and have it sitting on a non-firm device.
And I'll say listen, it really depends on what the remote access method is. In a go to my PC or a desktop as a service world, when things are done properly, no data ever leaves the cloud. So from a security perspective, it doesn't matter what the employees are using. However, if they're using a VPN and cloud applications, then you definitely want those endpoints to be secured. And what I'll say is, when you have to be careful when you say firm owned. I was speaking to a law firm last week. They said, oh yeah, we provided laptops for everyone during this pandemic. I said, that's great. So they're all secured and managed by the firm. No, we just ordered them on Amazon and shipped them straight to people's houses. I said, well, it's very nice of you, but that doesn't solve the bring your own device challenge. It's not just about who owns the equipment, it's about who's securing and managing it.
Yes,
So
great
yes,
point.
it would be the firm in those cases.
Great point.
Boy, we could go on. We are, you know what time it is? It's 2 minutes to our end time. So I am going to ask, and thank you. I wish we had more time for our conversation. It's always kind of nice to leave the audience wanting a little more. All of us are available to chat offline if you'd like to carry forth the conversation. I thought an interesting topic, is the Rogers adoption curve we're all familiar with. And you've got the innovators and the early adapters and the early majority. And where do you see your firm on that spectrum in terms of embracing technology, implementing technology to improve your firm's performance? Are you on that bleeding edge, the innovator out there, far ahead of competitors, early adapters, visionary, out there on the front line, but not the bleeding edge? Early majority, the late majority, or laggards? We're forced to change. That's the only way we change. Is it takes a pandemic to get us to change. And Morris, I'm going to ask you for your prediction where most of the participants on today's call see their law firms.
I will predict that they see themselves early majority.
Okay, Lee?
Well, let's see, my batting average is, I'm batting 0 today so far.
I didn't bring that up, but I'm glad you're keeping track. Lee, where do you think most people see their firms on this question?
I was going to say, I would have to tend to agree with Morris, but I would go with the late majority versus the early majority, but it may be somewhere in between those two.
And there's our reveal.
500 it is.
Hey, Morris.
And I got to think firms overestimate where they are on this spectrum, because I think most law firms are very slow to evolve, adapt, embrace change and a new way of doing things. And, Larry Richard, our psychologist friend, has done much research on the lawyer personality and the fact that they are very resistant to change. They love autonomy. So no one's going to tell me, how to get my work done or what software to use or to enter my contacts into the firm's CRM system. So interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. All these these polling questions will compile into an updated slide deck send that around to everybody. Some nice benchmarking data to share with your firms and your firm leaderships. Uri, we've been passing this guidance along for a long time. Think strategically, certainly when it comes to technology, and keep those lines of communication open and stay cool, calm, and collected, and bring on the experts when you need help. I haven't had air conditioning in my house here in Atlanta for 3 days, so there's nothing. They don't call it Hot Atlanta for nothing. And I don't know what this guy is doing down in the basement, but he comes up with all this foreign language and a bill. So I just trust that I'm not getting screwed over too badly. I just want cool air. Uri, is there anything else you might say as we close things out this afternoon?
Yeah, John, I just would close out with, and you've referenced a few of the conferences we did in the past, these webinars over the last 9 weeks. There's a lot of great information, and I know it's on this last slide. I think a lot of these innovations that we've been talking about, and Lee and Morris touched on some of them today, it's not optional. If you had an excuse that you got taken, like a lot of us in March and April, now is the time to reset. Now is the time to, if you haven't been on all the webinars, they're all there. They're all referenced. This stuff is serious. I think we're going to see some firms changing a lot in the next 2 to 3 months. Be a leader. Don't be a follower. That's really the future. So I think this is serious and great stuff, John. Thank you.
Uri, as always, thank you. Our contact information here. I believe Morris and Lee will invite you to call them directly, email them directly if you'd like more information, carry forth the conversation. We highly recommend you do that. And Lee and Morris, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon and being a part of our program.
Thank you, guys. John and
good
Uri,
stuff.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Good stuff. Hope to see you live and in person sometime soon. That might be late September. We're still holding on to our conference. Stay tuned. We'll be making a formal announcement shortly whether or not we're going forth. But in the meantime, we're going to be continuing to present these webinars. Give us your input. So when we hang up, you'll be directed to an online survey. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you want going forward. We really do take that in and try to get better and better and better with these programs. So Uri, thank you, my partner. Good to be with you.
Thank you, John.
Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a good afternoon, all. Thank you for joining us.
Over and out.
Bye.
Over and out.